This past weekend, I attended the first Halo Infinite LAN, HCS Raleigh, and in this video, we're going to talk about the whole experience because it was definitely a mixed experience to say the least. Before we get into today's video though, I want to talk to you about today's video sponsor, Opera GX, which is a web browser built specifically for gamers. So Opera GX has some really cool features, but one thing it can do is it can help enhance performance on your PC when gaming with your browser open in the background. Maybe you're listening to music, or maybe you have a guide up in the background, or maybe you just like to leave browsers open in the background so you can tab out when you're dead. The panel also lets users limit the CPU or RAM that they're willing to let their browser use. That way you can make sure your games are running as well as you want them to. Another cool feature is the network limiter, which will allow you to limit the network bandwidth used by the Opera GX browser to gain performance in games and in streams. Along with that, switching to Opera GX is super easy. It's equipped with an import tool that allows you to quickly import all your settings from your previous browser to Opera GX, like your browsing history, your bookmarks, and even your cookies. Along with that, Google Chrome extensions are also compatible with Opera browsers, so you get the full slew of Google Chrome extensions because obviously there's a ton of cool ones. You can also use Opera GX on mobile, and it can be directly linked to the desktop version. So remember guys, Opera GX is going to give you a ton of control over exactly how you want your browser working in the background. It's going to give you better performance in games, so make sure you guys check it out, and you can download it now for free in the description with my personal tracking link below. And thanks again to Opera GX. First things first, I just gotta say that meeting everyone and hanging out with everyone in person and finally meeting a bunch of people that I've been playing games online with and everything like that was an absolute blast. And don't get me wrong, the venue at times was very hype. Obviously too, if you were watching the Twitch numbers, Halo had the most viewers it has probably had since it was on TV. So this weekend was definitely a good weekend for Halo, and it needed to be. This was Halo's first Halo Infinite LAN, the first LAN back since Halo 5 stopped having LANs a long time ago, the first LAN back since the MCC Reach LAN, which was kind of a one-off LAN, and obviously there was the whole COVID break and everything like that where we were just doing online tournaments and the viewership was terrible. So having this LAN and having a ton of hype around a Halo tournament again and having it be the first tournament for a new game was definitely really good for Halo, obviously. But first I want to talk about kind of the main stage and the stream experience that everyone at home would have also experienced, although it's a little bit different when you're in the venue and you're kind of dealing with it. So if you guys know, on the first day, main stage and pool play and everything like that, they played with PCs. If you guys know Halo Infinite currently, PCs in custom games still crash way too often, and there was delays upon delays upon delays as PCs repeatedly crashed on main stage at pivotal times during games. There was one game I was sitting watching, which was SSG versus XSET, I believe. It was like 47-47, something like that. Tylenol picks up Invis, literally could win the game with this Invis, crashes out of the game, causing a restart, and they end up losing that game later in the series, like 2 or 3 restarts later. So these restarts were really anti-competitive. There was other scenarios throughout the tournament, even later on in the tournament when they were playing on Xboxes, where there would be a crash where one team was leading before the crash, and then after the crash, the momentum reset, and the other team would just come out and totally stomp them. That is something that absolutely needs to be fixed before the next major tournament, or just any tournament, because having those crashes and everything like that on your biggest stage and with all those eyeballs is an absolutely terrible look. I'm very glad that as we got further into the tournament and they played on Xboxes, there was less of those crashes, and toward the end of the tournament when we had the most eyeballs, there weren't any crashes, so that was definitely a good thing. I'll also applaud Esports Engine and 343 a little bit here, because after the first day, the event was not going well, but they were able to turn that around a bit and kind of get things back on track, and so you do have to give them some props for that, because I know whoever had to rewire all those setups and do everything like that overnight was probably there really late, and so you got to give them their props for that. Now that said, the main tournament and the stream was extremely fun to watch. Even if you were watching at home, you got the Twitch drops, exciting games, and everything like that. And besides the crashes, which were mostly gone after day 1, the stream for the tournament was a fairly good experience. So in the venue, it was a little bit weird. So you had the main setup that you would have seen obviously on the stream and everything like that, and then there was a side setup off to the side where they had some of the other teams playing, and the only thing that was weird about that was in the venue, we didn't get any sound over there, but when you would watch the stream online, you'd get the casters and everything like that. So I just thought that was a little bit odd that we didn't get any sound over there, but you'd get the sound if you were watching the B stream on Twitch. Not the end of the world, just something I thought I'd point out. That for the most part kind of covers the main stage and the mainstream experience. It had its hiccups, no doubt, but overall it was a pretty good tournament, and I think a lot of people were really hyped for competitive Halo again, which is a cool thing to see. Now on the flip side, the The open tournament was an absolute disaster. So I went down there and I played in the open tournament. This was my first Halo LAN, and they have a lot of fixes to do before the next open tournament because the whole thing was an absolute mess. So let me kind of put it into perspective. So open bracket was supposed to start at 11 a.m. on that Friday. Now, some people showed up and played their matches roughly 11:30, 12 o'clock, but a lot of teams, due to the fact that they didn't have enough setups for all the teams that were signed up, had to wait until wave 2 or 3 or even 4, and some teams didn't even play their first match, like in my case, until about 2 p.m. And then from there, you had to wait for the next round, and there was just delays upon delays because they would wait for the entire wave to finish before they would start up another wave, and getting out the brackets was slow and everything like that. So basically, day one on Friday, I played a game at 2 p.m., a game at 6 p.m., a game at 9 p.m., and we finished our tournament at about 11 p.m., where we ended up losing in lower bracket. And that was pretty much the end of the day. If we had won that loser bracket round 3 game, we would have moved on to day 2. Is what it is. It was my first LAN, and I was playing with a pickup team, so I was pretty pleased with how we did. But to be at the venue where check-in was at 8:30, from about 8:30 until 11, and to play 4 series of Halo was absolutely crazy to me. You basically just sat around waiting, and they would try and give you an estimate on when you would play, but it always seemed to be off, so you couldn't really leave the venue unless you had just finished a match without risking maybe missing your next one, and it was just a mess of an experience. Going into day 2 was supposed to be the continuation of open bracket, obviously, and then it was supposed to be the start of the free-for-all, which was supposed to start at 6 p.m. However, due to the huge delays from open bracket on the first day and continual delays on the second day, and the fact that main stage took the Xboxes from the open bracket section to use on main stage and in the featured stations, the free-for-all didn't start until about 10 p.m. at night, and a lot of people didn't even end up getting to play any of their free-for-all rounds until Sunday. Now, I will say, once we got into Sunday and it was champ bracket and the free-for-all, things did start to move a lot quicker because they had a lot less people. Once they got through the first couple rounds of the free-for-all, it did start to move pretty quickly, and it seems like they kind of figured it out a bit. But overall, the open experience, the 4v4, and the free-for-all was an absolute mess, and I still need to talk about the technical issues that players were having. So some of these technical issues were things that I personally experienced playing, and some of these were just stories I heard from talking to people, hanging out around while we were all waiting for our matches. But there were multiple cases where me or my teammates had absolutely no game audio and there was no way to fix it. There was obviously crashes that happened. There was games where you would load in with no HUD at all. And the worst thing which happened to us during our last game that knocked us out of the tournament is sometimes the Xboxes would give you about 30 FPS instead of the 120 FPS you were supposed to be getting, which is absolutely terrible when you're playing a team that has proper FPS and you're playing on about 30. It's extremely frustrating, it's extremely hard to play, and it's just a bad experience. Now, some of this I think is because Infinite isn't fully finished, it isn't fully optimized, and they have a lot of issues and bugs still with the game, but also due to supply and demand, the esports engine and 343 weren't able to get actual Xboxes for this event, so we were playing on Xbox dev kits, which I think probably played a part in some of those technical issues. Now, I will say I do have to give props to all the admins and stuff that are out on the floor. From what I heard, it sounds like esports engine deployed a new system right before the tournament, and they were able to get a little bit of training, but they were basically running blind, and with all the delays and all the issues, those admins were out on the floor for a long time, and I assume most of them were probably volunteers, although that I'm not totally sure about. They might have been paid. But there was just all sorts of issues, tech issues, organization issues, time issues, basically any type of issue you can imagine for open bracket, it existed. And I think while main stage besides the first day went relatively well, not enough people have been talking about how terribly open bracket actually went, because at the end of the day it finished and some of the teams did move on to champ bracket, and so it kind of gets swept under the rug of kind of all the hype of champ bracket and everything like that. But I think what's really important to remember is if you're an aspiring pro, or you are a pro, or you're on a sponsored team, you're probably going to keep going to these LANs. But if you're someone that flew to Raleigh to play in this event just for fun, or to hang out with friends and play with some friends, and you dealt with all these tech issues and maybe played 2 series over a 9-hour span, you might not show up to the next LAN, or you might not buy plane tickets again to the next LAN. And so 343 and esports engine really need to get this right in Anaheim, or they're going to start losing teams, because this was a huge turnout for an open LAN. It was the biggest turnout that Halo has ever had, and I don't want to see teams drop off a cliff like they did in Halo 5, but if they don't fix some of these issues and the open brackets continue to be ran poorly, then it probably is a possibility. At the end of the day though, I mean, the tournament was pretty pretty hype. I think everyone was excited watching Cloud9 and E United play in the finals. Watching Sentinels get knocked out by FaZe was crazy, only to see them lose a round later. So the tournament was really hype. It had a ton of hype moments, and Halo as an esport definitely has the possibility to kind of hit the ground running here. They just need to fix some of these issues for the next LAN, and hopefully that's what we see happen. Now, some of it is on esports engine side with the organization and the system that they use to run the bracket and everything like that, and then some of it is more on 343 side with the actual Infinite build itself. Definitely needs some fixes, and custom games definitely need some optimization, but hopefully they can work together, they can get it all figured out, and next LAN can run a lot more smoothly, both for open bracket teams and the teams in champ bracket, because I even saw tweets by pros who were playing on main stage that had issues with the Xboxes and just had to play through it, whether it was running at a really low FPS or sound was messed up. It wasn't just an open bracket issue, it was also something that was plaguing people playing on main stage. Another thing that I want to talk about from the event is sort of the mouse and keyboard experience for the open bracket players. So obviously at the event I played on a controller, so these are more stories I heard from mouse and keyboard players or kind of saw on Twitter, but basically this event did not go well for mouse and keyboard players. Now obviously there weren't very many because Halo is still a very controller dominated game, but with these open tournaments being inclusive of both inputs, you would expect some mouse and keyboard players to show up, and they did, but also HCS to be welcoming and inclusive of those mouse and keyboard players. And sure, while they did let them play, from what I heard on Twitter and from what I gathered talking to people, mouse and keyboard felt terrible at this event. So first of all, one big thing that I found out was that since open bracket is played on an Xbox, you do have mouse and keyboard support, but your buttons on the side of the mouse don't actually work. So some of the mouse and keyboard players didn't know that going into it because they'd been practicing on PC. So pretty much the day of the event, they had to redo all their keybinds, and obviously that's going to throw you for a loop. Another big thing that I heard was that there is a lot of input lag on those Xboxes, and I don't know if that's because we were playing on those Series X dev kits or if that's just an Xbox thing in general. Another big thing that I think is worth pointing out is just the stations didn't really have enough room, in my opinion, for mouse and keyboard players. So hopefully these are some things that 343 and Esports Engine kind of keep in mind for the next event. Now, I don't know if it's feasible to have open bracket be totally PCs, and honestly, the game might play better on an Xbox anyways, but maybe if you sign up and you are a mouse and keyboard player, maybe they'd have like a set amount of stations that have PCs, or at least have a PC, so that your mouse and keyboard player isn't just totally out of luck. I still had fun at the LAN, and I do want to go to more, so we'll see what happens there. I don't necessarily know when the next one I'll go to is, but competing and playing it was a ton of fun. Like I said, I went and played with basically a pickup team. We formed the squad on Sunday. We were able to win our first match, lose to BBG, who made champ bracket, knock a team out of the tournament in loser bracket, and then lose a close series, get knocked out of the tournament there at the end of the night. So I was pretty pleased with our performance. I thought we did okay, and in the free-for-all I made it to round 3, which isn't really that good, but again, it was the first ever LAN that I ever came to, so I'm not too sad about it, but hopefully next time around maybe I can do a little bit better if I decide to play again. Anyways guys, I think that's going to do it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and you got some insight into kind of how the event actually was there in person. If you guys want to catch me stream, I now stream on YouTube, so just watch the channel Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and you can also follow me over on Twitter and Instagram. And with that said, I'll see you all next time.